So last year at the Jewish New Year, I decided to take the theme of holiday renewal more literally than I usually do, and to start something new. I've been wrestling for a while now with the whole concept of starting over, beginning again, and what that means. I know our lives can shift dramatically in all kinds of ways, and we can feel like we're starting over. But at the same time, we carry ourselves with us. Everything we've been and done and learned. Our histories and stories and hard-won wisdom make us who we are. And I'm not sure we can leave that behind, even if we wanted to. So how do we actually start over? Both when our lives are in dramatic upheaval that we may or may not have chosen, but also in smaller ways when our lives are calm. So last year I decided to learn something new, and I decided to learn how to play the violin, which you know, something I'd wanted to do for a long time. I'd been telling myself it was too hard and that I was too old to start something new and hard. Plus, the last time I decided to learn something new and hard, which was Hebrew, some of you may recall it didn't go all that well. I signed up for violin lessons anyway. I learned how to hold the violin, I learned how to hold the bow, which took longer than you might imagine. Then I learned how to make a sound with the bow, and 6 months of practice later, I could play a halting rendition of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and I could also play one single lovely line of Dvorak's New World Symphony. By March, I had inched my way to page 16 of the beginner, pre-beginner violin book, where they try to come up with lines of melody that only require 3 or 4 notes. But then I didn't practice for the whole month when we were out of the country last April. And when I came home, I had to start completely over. Like page 2 of the beginner, pre-beginner violin book over. It was, and it still is, completely humbling, though it's going slightly faster the second time around. I think I've mentioned before that some days I actually give myself a headache while I am practicing. And on those days, I'm not sure why I keep doing this, other than because I love the violin, and I want to be able to play it even the tiniest bit in this lifetime. But also, I think I keep at it because I am learning so much that has nothing to do with the violin. I'm learning about beginning something, and then beginning it again, and again, and however many times it will take. I'm learning that being willing to be a beginner, especially in hard things, and guess what? Almost every single thing is hard at the beginning, is really important. The frustration of it is amazing. The humility of it, the willingness to be surprisingly vulnerable and play notes in front of my teacher. Oh, though I've noticed that I try to keep him talking as long as possible. So I ask all these open-ended questions of the violin teacher. And I'm doing that so I can minimize the time that I actually have to play in front of him because I feel so utterly vulnerable. The bad news is that he's on to me now, and so I'm considering switching teachers. But I had this realization that I'm 58 years old now, and it's probably going to take me about 20 years to be able to play a whole song. So it's a really good thing I started now. Rosh Hashanah is the birthday of the world. It's the annual celebration of renewal and rebirth. Now, admittedly, the world is not having a great year so far. There have been earthquakes, hurricanes, and catastrophic floods in just the last week. I am so worried about this world. I know you are too. And I know some of us have family members and friends and loved ones in places where there is no electricity and where homes are flooded or where the rubble is just starting to be cleared. Are you looking for Grammy? She is in the way back. This morning, our UU neighbors in Leominster are holding an online gathering for healing in the aftermath of the destruction and flooding in that city just 15 miles from here. This morning, our UU kin in Montpelier, Vermont are displaced from their meeting house for I don't know how long, nor do they, due to catastrophic flooding this summer, which destroyed all of downtown Montpelier. This morning, loved ones are sorting through rubble in Morocco. How do we celebrate newness and rebirth? How do we hold on to that hope for sweetness in the midst of suffering? The good news is that hope is one of the theological underpinnings of Rosh Hashanah. It is this underlying belief that even in the midst of what seems like so much undoing, so much destruction, the work of creation is never done. As the Jewish theologian Theodore Gassner writes, the process of creation is ongoing and continuous. The breath of the holy moves constantly upon the face of the waters. The light is continually being brought out of the darkness. In other words, creation is not a one-time thing. It happens over and over. In other words, it's not over until it is. Not for any one of us and not for the world either. Light is continually being brought out of the darkness. It happened this morning. And we too need to turn and return toward the light. That is what the practice of teshuvah means, I think. Turning toward the light. Turning toward our best selves, turning away from the things which are not life-giving to us, and turning toward the things that are. And teshuvah is also about waking up. That's why that loud shofar blast, the reminder to wake up. To wake up from the ways we sleepwalk through our lives, the ways we take people and time for granted and forget that time is so precious and that we actually don't have forever to learn how to play the violin. We don't have forever to live. It's so hard for us to remember this. And so every year we get another chance. Another invitation. Rosh Hashanah is a strange combination, really, but it's also beautiful. We eat apples and honey to taste sweetness, even as we remember that our time here is limited. We wish one another goodness in the new year, even as we try to take in that none of us knows how much time we have left with the people we love. But maybe knowing that, really knowing it, is also how we taste the sweetness. Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt, who serves a congregation in the Berkshires and is also a poet and a writer of a blog some of you know I love called The Velveteen Rabbi. She started it when she was a rabbinical student, but now, as she puts it, she runs and plays with the real rabbis. Anyway, every year she writes a poem for the Jewish high holidays. And the quote I read at the very beginning of the service is from her Rosh Hashanah poem from 2019, which was the year her mother died. That poem is called Now. And here is the whole poem. Suddenly the two stately trees outside my window are shot through with sprays of gold. My heart rails against the turning season like a child resisting bedtime. But the trees hear the shofar's call. Come alive, flare up, be who you are, let your light shine. The katydids and the crickets sing, the time is now, the time is now. The last time I visited my mother, I told her it's okay if you're ready to go. My heart railed against her dying, but after one last burst of color, she was ready to rest. This year, the tree's razzle-dazzle speaks to me in her voice. Be here while you can. Drink every drop of daylight, and when the night falls, it's full of stars. Don't be afraid. What does that mean for us? What could that mean for us this year, to come alive, to drink every drop of daylight, to be here while we can? This week I saw a quote on Facebook, that source of great spiritual wisdom. But this one I thought really was. It was, we each have two lives. The second one begins when we realize we only have one. We each have two lives. The second one begins when we realize we only have one. What does it mean to begin that second life? To wake up to the truth of the limits of our time. And can we ever really stay awake? I don't think so. I think it is just human to forget the urgency and the preciousness of this life and go back to sleepwalking. But I also believe that that is why we're here, to help each other stay awake.